Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, I want to talk about the warfare by immigration, also the 1965 Immigration and what was I saying? And the Naturalization Act of 1965. I kept saying Nationalization Act on the radio yesterday on Prager Show, and like nobody told me, so forgive me for that. I'll be back on Prager on Thursday. I'll clarify that. But that act was an absolute disaster. Allegedly, it was well-meaning. I'll give you some of the quotes. I've shared this already, but I want to share it again in the context of the podcast today. The warfare that exists at our border, and I want to try to connect the dots how that has been a problem. That Immigration Act needs to be reformed. It has done more damage, in my opinion, to the United States than it has done good, and I think that we are reaping the consequences of the 1965 Act. Even today, Democrats claim that it was a way to get past national quotas. But in order to get past the national quotas, where you had Western and Northern Europeans coming to the United States, they decided to discriminate against them. All right. So this wasn't about ending discrimination. It started a new type of discrimination in the United States. We're going to be talking about that. First, guys, I do want to tell you this. If you have not seen Police State, please go see Police State. America is at a tipping point. And listen, I'm Carl Jackson. I'm here to tell you about this new movie that you have to see. Dinesh D'Souza's movie, Police State, exposes the government's relentless persecution of the conservative MAGA movement. The America we know and love is becoming more and more like a police state every single day. The FBI has turned its eyes away from the real dangers in the world to target what they call domestic terrorists with the totalitarian agenda that's treating conservative Americans like criminals. They're targeting their political opponents, using mass surveillance and censorship, indoctrinating our children, and threatening families with military-style raids on our homes, threatening people like you and me who speak our minds and stand up for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, our God-given American liberties. Directed by Dinesh D'Souza, Debbie D'Souza, and Bruce Schooley, Police State sounds the alarm. If you demand your freedom, they're coming after you. How did we get here? And how do we turn the tide of this tyrannical government's agenda? You have to see this movie, Police State. Buy it or stream it now at policestatefilm.net. That's policestatefilm.net. Guys, check it out. You will not be disappointed in that film. And quite frankly, it's scary where we are. Speaking of scary where we are, I do want to talk about kind of how we've gotten here. I'm going to take you back to a video, an oldie but goodie, of Ann Coulter appearing on Sean Hannity's show. This is way back in 2012. This was when Romney either had just lost I believe he had just lost the election against Barack Obama in 2012. This is Ann Coulter having a conversation with Sean Hannity on his program about Romney's loss and also the Immigration Act of 1965 that, in my opinion, has contributed to the war that we're seeing waged at our border right now. And I'll describe what I mean by that, or explain what I mean by that. There was a fantastic column that I spoke about yesterday on Prager Show. I didn't get in through the entire column. I want to do that with you because it's so important that we understand what's happening at the border and around the world, frankly, it particularly as it pertains to the Middle East, why it's so detrimental to what's happening to the United States and what is going to happen to the United States if we don't get a hold of our borders immediately. But let's do this. Let's go right to the video clip. Por favor, Mr. Gabe Cassiano.
Very good, valid point. I totally agree with you. But I also think that we cannot not address what I was just talking about. America, in some ways, is changing.
Yes.
And it's changing in this way is that, you know, and it's the allure of free. It's the allure of, oh, no pressure. It's the allure of government taking care of you. Look, it's worked throughout history. It's worked in Europe. Now, the results are also predictable.
They run out of money.
They run out of other people's money. But that seems to me that has set now in America and maybe majority.
No, you're right. And the two problems with that are, first of all, Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act was specifically designed to change the demographics of this nation. I think Mitt Romney would have won last night if he had the same demographics Ronald Reagan had. Since 1965, 85% of our legal immigrants have been from the third world. The Democrats lure them in, get them on government assistance. They are far more recent immigrants are far more likely to be on government assistance than native-born Americans. The second problem with that is once you start down that road, it's harder to take treats away from people than to have them never get on those treats to begin with. But I mean, you look at the demographics of the country, I don't think it's insuperable, because another law of elections is the party out of power tends to really come back big in the midterm elections. So we got to start working for 2014 and planning for the next
election. All right, slow down, Coulter. We just finished an election yesterday. Hang on a second.
All right, so that was Ann Coulter. What did I just do here? That was Ann Coulter on Sean Hannity's program, and that was quite some time ago. That was in 2012. But listen and pay attention to what she said. She believes that Mitt Romney, and guys, we all know none of us like Mitt Romney now. We get it. But I think we all agree that he would have been better as president than Barack Obama was, who Barack Obama fundamentally set out to transform America, and he did just that. Obviously, that was his second term. We thought there was a referendum against Barack Obama, and indeed, I thought there was. But as Ann Coulter explained then, there's no way Romney would have lost, even though he ended up being a horrible candidate to then President or former President Barack Obama, if the demographics were the same that they were prior to the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. And she's absolutely right. See, what the left tried to do with Ted Kennedy and LBJ, or Lyndon B. Johnson at the time, there's nothing to see here. As a matter of fact, let me read to you the quote that I read on Prager Show yesterday. This is what the liberal liar Ted Kennedy, liberal liar of the Senate Ted Kennedy, had to say before he passed away regarding the bill back in 1965. He says the bill will not flood our cities with immigrants. Wrong. He was the lead supporter of that bill. And he also said, quote, it will not upset the ethnic mix of our society. Wrong. It will not relax the standards of admission. Wrong. It will not cause American workers to lose their jobs. Wrong. This guy was wrong in every facet, and I believe intentionally so, and I'll get to that. The sentiment was echoed by Lyndon B. Johnson at the time, who, upon signing the act on October 3rd, 1965, said the bill would not be revolutionary. That was wrong. He says, quote, it does not affect the lives of millions. It will not reshape the structure of our daily lives or add, importantly, to either our wealth or our power, close quote. And both of these gentlemen were completely wrong. You heard what Ann Coulter said, and it is so true. The Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965 caused a lot of harm to America, a harm in which we're still feeling to this day, where you had people that were, first off, they discriminated against immigrants from Europe, from Northern and Western Europe. So they didn't want any more of them. I don't know why they couldn't have just offered a temporary moratorium or say, come one, come all. No, instead, what they decided to do in order to kind of end these national quotas and to claim that America is no longer racist. Basically, you have to keep the 1965 Act in context with the civil rights movement of that day, of that era. And so you have the United States of America, particularly the racist Democrat Party, trying to run away from their racism and saying, okay, not only are we deciding to go a different route here in the United States, but we're now going to say, come one, come all, to all of these other nations around the world, even third world countries, even though we don't know necessarily what we're bringing in, but we're going to assume that everybody that we are bringing in believe what we believe. And listen, let's be real. We'll get to, since we're bringing them into the country, the Democrat Party will reap the benefits of their votes because we're going to give them a lot of goodies that started under FDR. We're going to continue it obviously, and that's exactly what LBJ did with the war on poverty. He increased the welfare state for blacks and other minorities. This was all part of the plan, in my opinion, and it has worked out great for the Democrats up until now. Now, these policies are going to hurt us. These policies are hurting us. The protests that you see going around, the anti-Israeli protests, the pro-Hamas protests that you see happening around the country today, in large part, are due to this policy, the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. Oh, guys, and by the way, I got to remind you, I know you're looking at the screens behind me. Just remember, this studio is being redone this week. We're working on different lighting and everything here, so please forgive us. Please forgive me. It's going to look like crap for a week. You're going to see glare on the screen behind me and all that kind of stuff. I'm just being completely real with you, just so you understand. But this will not be forever. Gabe will stop slacking by next week. For those of you that are concerned, this is completely Gabe's fault. But I just want to make sure that we make that clear. All right, so moving on. So if you see that, just please forgive us for about another week or so. I promise we'll get this studio under control. But right now, we are undergoing renovation. Okay, enough of that. So again, this policy has been detrimental to the United States of America. Let me just read some of the intentions. If I can get my computer to wake up. This is from the immigration history.org. All right, so this is basically a summary. So more than 4 decades after the passage of the 1924 Reed-Johnson Act, Congress legislated a system of immigration control to replace, listen to this, the discriminatory national origins system. The new system implemented preferences which prioritized family reunification, 75%, employment, 20%, and refugee status by 5%, refugee status at 5%, spouses, and refugee status and spouses at 5%. Minor children and parents remained non-quota immigrants. Wait a minute. Minor children and parents remained non-quota immigrants. So basically, you can bring in children and parents after the 1965 Act. Each country received the same annual cap of 20,000, and for the first time, countries in the American hemisphere face numeric caps on immigration. This law opened the door to non-European immigration in unprecedented numbers, with many arriving through the employment preferences, which heavily favor highly educated workers. This contributed to the image of Asian Americans who have immigrated predominantly since 1965 as, quote, model minorities, close quote. However, because the law does not provide for immigration by unskilled, quote unquote, workers in sectors like agriculture, construction, and domestic service, it has fostered a growing population of unauthorized immigrants, illegal aliens basically, who are gainfully employed but lack lawful means to immigrate. A majority of unauthorized illegal aliens are from poorer countries in the Americas seeking greater opportunity in the wealthier United States. So this, the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act, brought us a lot of the illegal immigration that we see today, where we're getting a lot of unskilled workers or low-skilled workers into the United States that are contributing to low-skilled work here, but it's also hurting people that are American citizens that are starting off in jobs that have largely been taken away by many illegals, and this particularly hurts black communities, poor black communities. If you want to get a starting job, and then you got illegal aliens that are willing to work that job for cheaper wages, it's absolutely amazing. And now you've got a lot of snooty people that don't even want to work some of the jobs, and also you have machines that work a lot of the agricultural jobs where you don't need a lot of people to do the work as much. I do want to play this for you as well. This is, I believe this is Coulter too. She was on an interview with Democrats dropping the blacks and moving on to Hispanics. If I recall correctly, this was in 2012 as well. This is ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos. So let's listen to what she has to say here, and then I will get to this issue of the warfare by immigration that's being waged at our border that we need to be aware of. Let's go ahead and roll this video, por favor, Gabe.
You made kind of a provocative comment in your new book here, Mugged, and I think it's on page 151. You write that various groups, feminist, gay rights groups, and those who are defending immigrants have commandeered the black civil rights experience.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that because I think it's one of the most important points of the book. I mean, I think the way liberals have treated blacks like children and many of their policies have been harmful to blacks. At least they got the beneficiary group right. We do have to, I mean, we shouldn't. There is the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow laws. We don't owe the homeless. We don't owe feminists. We don't owe women who are desirous of having abortions, but that's, or gays who want to get married to one another. That's what civil rights has become for much of the left. They dropped the blacks after 5 minutes.
Immigrant rights are not civil rights?
No, I think civil rights are for blacks.
See, this is essentially the problem, and the Republicans don't understand.
What have we done to the immigrants? We owe black people something. We have a legacy of slavery. Immigrants haven't even been in this country.
But you see, most of us are either immigrants or are the descendants of immigrants, and we understand that not everybody. There are Native Americans there, but we understand in this country. We understand in this country that kind of self-deportation, making things so difficult for immigrants, for undocumented immigrants, that they have to leave, or the DREAM Act, threatening to veto the DREAM Act, which is what Romney has said. I mean, and again, we have Governor Romney, who is basically taking a position that is anti a large and the fastest growing segment of the electorate.
And here's the thing, if Republicans don't do something with immigration, and if Republicans are so far away from Latinos, they're going to lose not only this election, they might lose the White House for generations.
The future.
And Texas to turn from red to blue.
That's why the Democrats are dropping the blacks and moving on to the Hispanics, because they're a larger group of Hispanics now. But could I just say to Jorge, I hate to disagree with you when you're attacking President Obama, but I think the point on immigration is you can have open borders or you can have a welfare state. You cannot have both.
You can have open borders or you can have a welfare state. You cannot have both. And right now, we have both in the United States under Joe Biden here. Guys, let me say this. I expressed these views the other day. I want to express them again. Diversity is not America's strength. It is our weakness. Diversity, if you're talking about diversity of thought, that's one thing. That's what did make America great, right? We're free to think what we want to think. We're free to be religious or non-religious. We have free speech rights here, or at least we had. The Biden administration appear to be trying to take those away. But diversity to the left means chaos. It means dividing all of us. It means men can be women and women can be men. It means we cater to the LGBTQ community, and we cater to groups instead of looking out for the welfare of all Americans. This is what the left wants. Diversity is not our strength. Diversity has been a disaster. Diversity has brought us the pro-Hamas protests that we see going on college campuses and blue cities across the United States of America. That's what diversity has brought you, the diversity that the left subscribes to. It has brought you chaos. It has brought you division. All right, because now everybody, instead of being an American, instead of this one great melting pot, and this one great melting pot that is the United States of America, well, this community has this grievance, and this community or this group has this grievance. That's what the left has done. So no, then when you hear that people say diversity is our strength, no, it is not. Diversity is a weakness. Also, you heard this commentator on this program say to Ann Coulter back in the day, that I'm an immigrant. We're a nation of immigrants. No, we are not a nation of immigrants. That makes no damn sense. All right? Just stop and think about it. There's no country in the world that is a nation of immigrants. Is Mexico a nation of immigrants? Is the UK a nation of immigrants? Is Canada? Nobody claims to be a nation of immigrants. We're the only country dumb enough to do that, to say that. We're a nation of citizens. If you're not an American citizen, you don't have certain rights. We're not a nation of immigrants. You may come here, you may immigrate here, but you're supposed to come here legally to become an American citizen. So once you come to the United States of America, if you do things the right way, you're not an immigrant, at least not any longer. You are a citizen. And this is an argument that the left tries to use all the time in order to justify their open border policies. That's all that is about. So don't buy into this hype that we are a nation of immigrants. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and yet they get away with saying it. We are not a nation of immigrants. If you're in the United States of America, legally, you're an American citizen. You were born into this country. You're an American citizen. You're not a damn immigrant. That's so silly. And for some reason, people just fall for this argument. Hook, line, and sinker. It makes no sense to me. We are a very generous nation when it comes to legal immigration, whereas we allow in approximately 1.1 million people every year. And quite frankly, I believe that needs to come to an end. I believe that there needs to be a moratorium on that. I had some numbers for you. I just want to share these numbers with you before we get to the war that's occurring on our borders right now. So 1.1 million people approximately that we allow into the country every single year. All right, now that we're letting in 3 million people, that's what the numbers were, the record-breaking number. You know what? Then I'm sorry, there needs to be a moratorium on illegal immigration. So we let in 3 million people into the United States illegally this year. All right, so that's 3 years that there needs to be a moratorium on legal immigration. I'm sorry, but this is what the Biden administration has wrought. We need to deport visa overstays. I've given this spiel before. I'm going to give it again. Visa overstays, bye-bye. You need to be deported. Merit-based job-related reasons need to rise. They're at about 12%. You saw the Immigration and Naturalization Policy Act say that they were putting that at 20%. I believe it's around 12%, the latest numbers that I saw. That needs to go up. We need to go to a merit-based immigration system. And at that point, I don't care where you come from. I don't care where you come from. Unless you come from a hot zone. If you do come from a hot zone, and what that means is a nation or an area that harbors terrorists, that believes in terrorism, I don't want you here in the United States. All right. I don't care how smart you are. Don't want you here. All right. Also, family-based. So that needs to increase. All right. So job or merit-based immigration needs to increase. Family-based immigration currently makes up 2/3 of all immigration. That would probably need to decrease. And remember, I want a full-out moratorium, but I will settle for a decrease in these numbers. Asylum or diversity visas would decrease by more than half, or at least they need to decrease by more than half. Right now, we prioritize family, spouses, children, and parents for family unification. We also do it with extended family. That should not continue to occur. 66% of immigrants come to the U.S. on random chance. They're admitted solely based upon a relative that they have inside of the United States. That needs to come to an end. We need to eliminate the diversity visa lotto system. That's how we get Ilhan Omar as a congresswoman, the ingrate that she is. All right, so now I want to move on to this. And by the way, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble is where you can go to find me. Please review. Give us a review on YouTube, both YouTube and Rumble. I believe you can give us a review on both places. That'll help us to move up the charts. We would certainly appreciate that very, very, very much. It would be greatly appreciated here. Sorry, I have to... okay, sorry. All right, now, here it is. Okay, this warfare by immigration. I do want to talk about this real quickly. All right, so there was a piece in American Mind. Oh, and follow me on all things social media. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram at The Carl Jackson Show is where you can go to find me. Please subscribe. Again, well, I already said subscribe to the podcast, but please share. Please follow me on social media and share my posts. I would appreciate that. All right, so the attack on Israel and the demoralization of the West. This was a piece written by Brian T. Kennedy of American Mind. I'm going to try to get him onto the program, but he starts off the summary like this. During the Cold War, when America and the West took their national survival more seriously, he says, a key part of the Soviet Union's global terrorist network was the PLO, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLO and various offshoots, he writes, were supported in their efforts by their Islamic allies. In Libya under Muammar Gaddafi, the Red Brigades in Italy, he writes, the Sandinista National Front in Nicaragua, Badr Meinhof group in West Germany, and the Provisional Irish Republican Army in Northern Ireland. Even communist China, though not the superpower it is today, he writes, supplied the Palestinians with military equipment and logistical support. Such was the unity of the communist world and its allies. So that's what we were fighting during the Cold War, when America and the West took their national survival more seriously, and we were at odds with the Soviet Union and their global terrorist network. Now the roles have flipped. All right, he talks about between China and Russia. So now the CCP is the chief, basically the chief organizer of the current terrorist network. So even though what we're seeing in the Middle East, I believe it is a war between Israel and Iran. Yes, Israel happens to be taking out a proxy of Iran, or one of their proxies, in Hamas. And hopefully things won't flare up too badly with Hezbollah. But if they do, I pray that they take them out as well. Maybe that is a good time. Actually, Gabe, let's get that video of Netanyahu pulled up. And so maybe we should go ahead and play that in this podcast before we end it here. So now the roles have flipped between China and Russia. So now the CCP, again, are the chief organizer of the current terrorist network around the country. So we're seeing that flare up in the Middle East. Now, don't get me wrong. There are going to be countries that are going to take advantage of the war in the Middle East and the weakness they see in Joe Biden, and they're going to try to do things that make, in their opinion, that make their country better. And I totally get that, and I totally understand that. But make no mistake about it, there is a greater threat. That greater threat is China, is Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping, according to this columnist, has positioned communist China as an enemy of the United States. All right, we all agree to that, I believe, if you're listening to this podcast. He declared a people's war against the U.S. in 2019 and seeks to marginalize and demoralize anyone who stands with the U.S. and against China, and against China's march toward global domination. And make no doubt about it, that's exactly what China is doing. So China needs Islamic jihadists to help take down the West. So that's why I say, and I will continue to say, not only do I stand with Israel, I stand with Israel wholeheartedly, because you have to understand the war against Israel, the attacks against Israel, is an attack against the West. It is an attack against Western ideas, not to mention that we've had over 30 Americans murdered there and many more Americans missing. You've had Representative Corey Mills offer flights from Israel to bring people into safety or back into the United States. Governor Ron DeSantis has done the same thing to bring Americans from Israel back into the United States of America, into Florida. So we are involved in this fight, whether we want to be or not. I'm not one of these big war guys. Honestly, this stuff has gotten all so crazy. But I do believe what we're seeing, what we're witnessing with Israel, does impact us directly. And one of the reasons it does too is because Islamic jihadists it's still a real thing. It's still a real threat. J6 protesters are not. And many of these people, remember, I've talked to you before about special interest aliens that are coming into the United States of America, over 70,000. And that does not include the gotaways that we know of, special interest aliens. Those are illegal aliens coming from war-torn Islamic jihadist terrorist hotspots around the world. I want to play this clip. This is from the from Benjamin Netanyahu, president of Israel. And here's he's pretty resolved to defeat Hamas, and he has to be. You have, I saw this in the news today. Let me if I can pop this up really quick. I saw this in the news today, but I mean, people are just adamant. The UN, even some, and so are so many people, sadly, in the United States, so many Americans, they just want this ceasefire when it comes to Israel. I'm sorry, you can't have a ceasefire when it comes to Israel. Here it is. UN General Assembly demands Israel work towards truce, ceasefire, and refuses to condemn Hamas. It's probably because some of the countries that they're from, they're probably in wholehearted agreement with this. They want to see, this global realignment. They want to see China take over as the big dog. They don't want the United States as a beacon. They do not want Israel as a beacon. They don't want them as the cities on the hill to look up to, democratic societies, when so many other societies, and in the UK as well, when many other societies are run by dictators. So here's Benjamin Netanyahu being resolute and responding to people like the UN that are demanding that Israel has a ceasefire or implement a ceasefire when it comes to Hamas. These fools have to be crazy. Here's Benjamin Netanyahu.
I want to make clear Israel's position regarding a ceasefire. Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war, a war for our common future. Today we draw a line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. It is a time for everyone to decide where they stand. Israel will stand against the forces of barbarism until victory. I hope and pray that civilized nations everywhere will back this fight. Because Israel's fight is your fight. Because if Hamas and Iran's axis of evil win, you will be their next target. That's why Israel's victory will be your victory. But make no mistake, regardless of who stands with Israel, Israel will fight until this battle is won, and Israel will prevail. May God bless Israel, and may God bless all those who stand with Israel.
All right, so God bless Benjamin Netanyahu for his words of courage, and they are obviously needed, in my opinion, his words of resolve, and we have to be resolute to defeat Hamas. And he's absolutely right. It is our fight, too, and I'll tell you why, because we've already experienced this stuff. Guys, we sat here and we witnessed the World Trade Center bombings. We witnessed we witnessed 9/11. We witnessed right here in Orlando the Pulse nightclub Islamic terrorist attack, which the media to this day tries to lie and say that it was all. Actually, they don't try to. They basically fooled everyone in saying that the Pulse nightclub attack right here in Orlando was all about gays being shot up, when it was not. It was an Islamic terrorist that just searched on his phone for easy targets, for soft targets. And sadly, he found them at the Pulse nightclub. Had nothing to do with being gay. As a matter of fact, there's rumors that he dabbled in the lifestyle. It had nothing to do with that. All right, so anyway, now getting back to this. It had everything to do with evil. So China needs Islamic jihadists, all right, to help take down the West. And that's exactly what they're doing. You help take down and you destroy Western ideals. China wants to make sure they destroy Western ideals, so they'll just pretend like, hey, this isn't their fight, so on, etc. All the while, they're not necessarily speaking out against this, because why not take out Israel? Why not? You see this new this new axis of evil emerging, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Why not take out these ideas that are fundamentally different from yours so that you become the powering hegemony globally? All right, so China supports today of Hamas, he writes, Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic of Iran, and again, this is from American Mind, demonstrates their role as leader of the global communist movement allied with the Islamic world, which again seeks to destroy America and the West, he writes. They have little reason to doubt that they are winning. In London, for example, you guys may have seen the protests over the weekend in London that occurred in London. Where most of the Muslim immigrants defended the attack by Hamas on Israel. American cities also have seen similar displays, sadly. But this is what we're seeing. Again, an attack on Israel is an attack against the West. He writes, terrorist campaigns to destroy Israel were useful to animate certain parts of the Islamic world on behalf of the protracted war that the communists were waging against human freedom. All right. So these were once well understood features of the ideological political war between the Soviet Union and the United States, but they've been forgotten. And I'll tell you why they've been forgotten, because they haven't been taught. They haven't been taught, whether it's high school, whether it's higher education, college and university campuses. None of the students understood what was really going on with the Cold War at the time. And yes, we've moved on from that Cold War, but as you can see now, I don't even necessarily think this is a Cold War. I don't know exactly what to call it with communist China, but I believe that they're on the march. It isn't a traditional war by any means. I think we're sitting here and we're waiting and we're hoping, not hoping, but we're sitting here and we're waiting. We're expecting to see some traditional type warfare or some traditional type attacks, sadly, like Israel saw. And I'm not convinced that that's what we're going to see, now, at least not necessarily. I do think eventually we will see that type of gore and stuff right here in the United States of America. But I believe that China is waging a different type of war. I mean, we have open borders. China and Russia cannot believe that our borders are wide open, so they're sending people here. They're sending fentanyl here. They're killing people. China is by 100,000 Americans on average every year. With our open borders, they're already waging a war against us. In my opinion, they sent the big dog virus here. All right, wink, wink for those of you that are on YouTube. They sent that here. Now, there's no doubt about it that Fauci helped them out with the gain of function research. Okay, no doubt about that. But in my opinion, the CCP had a desired use for that virus, and they executed that, in my opinion. All right. The West also presented to the world an intellectual defense of freedom of the mind. The columnist writes, freedom of religion, freedom of peoples to determine how they would govern themselves. It represented the West did man's highest aspirations. It is the thing for which men crossed oceans and the thing for which men fought and died. But we're losing that. Most Americans still hold these beliefs, but they're being rejected by the elites running our country, namely on colleges and universities and in these government bureaucracies. But during the Cold War, neither Russia or China, again, would have fathomed that the United States of America, and again, Russia during the Cold War being the top dog, now China being the top dog, none of them would have imagined that the United States of America would be so dumb to keep our borders open. And not only that, have people on the left, Democrats on the left, cheering for open borders, because these useful idiots don't understand that they're slaughtered. Their very lives are at stake. China and Russia are sitting back like, wow, these people are complete and utter idiots. Oh, man, it's weird. It's weird. There was always immigration, of course, including illegal immigration. The writer writes, well, first he says, the United States that would open its borders to millions of people from all over the world, regardless of their country of origin or political views. Basically, that's insane. The Soviets and the Chinese would not believe it. They couldn't contemplate that America would be so stupid, because they would never do that. There was always immigration, of course, he writes, including illegal immigration, but the seriousness of the Cold War required that new citizens were mostly of a certain kind, even if most came for economic reasons. This is why I said the 1965 Naturalization or Immigration and Naturalization Act is a complete detriment to the United States at this point. It's time for us to be a little more, what's the word? Discriminatory when it comes to the people coming into the country. And again, not based upon skin color, but based upon where the heck did you come from and what do you have to offer the United States of America. It has to go that way right now. Hopefully, maybe not always, but it has to right now. And by the way, those of you that are Americans, don't be afraid to have big families. It's really important. So we shouldn't be surprised that America's major cities and our nation's capital have been filled with protesters who are marching in solidarity with Hamas. We shouldn't be surprised by that, given our immigration policies. Many of the protesters from the Arab nations or Palestinian areas have imported their grievances and openly embraced terrorism right here in the United States. And this is a scary thing. Others are communist, Marxist, Leninist Muslims and Muslim immigrants who are voting to defend openly the use of terrorism as a legitimate political act. That's what we're seeing. So also you should know this. Biden hooked the PLO up, the Palestinian Liberation Authority, with $200 million as one of his first acts when he became president of the United States. That had been cut off by Trump when he was president because it was being used to support Hamas. This is also a president in Joe Biden that has given billions, tens of billions of dollars to Iran. Not just that $6 billion, but literally the sanctions relief has allowed Iran, I shouldn't say Iran, because I don't want to get the Iranian people mixed up with their leaders who are Islamic jihadists. But it has given the leaders of Iran a buttload of money, and they use that money to enact terrorism all around the globe. Biden also decided to support a global alliance led by China that was antithetical to the interests of the United States of America. In so doing, the columnist writes, Biden has not only turned against one of America's closest friends, that is the state of Israel, but has signaled to the communist movements within the United States on whose side he stands. And the guy doesn't seem to recognize that the communist movement is using the Islamic jihadists to knock out Western ideals in the Middle East and now in Europe. Europe isn't gonna, if you guys saw those protests in Europe, pictures and videos of the protests, it's too late for Europe. I'm sorry. The Muslims there are going to hump like jackrabbits and just have babies like crazy, because the European people sadly are not having babies, not in the rate that they should. A lot of people aren't getting married until they're way older, so it is what it is. All right. Also, an important level, the writer writes, the Biden administration, despite Joe Biden's pronouncements about the need for greater U.S. support of Israel and his embrace of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, shares ideologically the broad animus that the pan-Islamic world has for the West in general, in the United States, and in Israel in particular. Whether Biden himself understands it this way is another matter. He has surrounded himself, the author writes, with the State Department and a National Security Council who share the American left's disdain for what America represents. That is, he says, what else is to explain the support of communist China, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah? And what is to explain the knowing importation of 5.1 million new illegal immigrants during the past 2.5 years, on top of the 13 to 20 million illegal immigrants that were already here? I would say we're probably already 25 to 30 million here, in my opinion, but I don't know. Nobody knows. That's the truth of the matter. All right. So we appear to be in global war that's led by the CCP. That's the sad state. So by some estimates, 100,000 military-age Chinese men have entered the country, he says, and even if the vast majority of other illegal immigrants were from Central and South America, it would be more than certain that roughly 1 million of these came from the Islamic world. That includes Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the like. If, as it appears, we are at war with a global force led by the CCP in concert with elements of the Islamic world, we can expect that included in that 1 million will be members of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So here's a problem that we're facing. At the heart of our confusion is a simple fact that we have not defeated Islam as a political cause. We have not fundamentally disabused the millions of Muslims who have flooded into Europe and the United States of the idea that Islam will conquer the United States and the West. They still believe that they can do so because we go out of our way to cater to them. God, did I forget? Yeah, we go out of our way to cater to them. I mean, it's insane. We go out of our way to say, oh no, while Israelis, a day after Israelis are being slaughtered, oh, we want to make sure there's no Islamophobia. Like, where? Serious, where? Isn't it amazing that the only time that you hear anything about Islamophobia is after Jews have been assaulted or killed? Nobody talks about it because there's hardly any of it. The problem is there's too much complacency when it comes to Islam. There's too much acquiescing, if you will. This religion of peace. Put simply, America presented to the Islamic world the clear view that we would not challenge them ideologically, and it is idiotic. While bodies were still burning inside the World Trade Center, our leadership classes insisted again and again that Islam was a religion of peace. He says this was a knowable falsehood given both the text of the Quran and the belief of its adherents. We continually presented this lie to both the American people and to the Islamic world, he writes. We presented it knowing it was not true and knowing that the Islamic world would see such a lie as an admission that the West no longer believed in the goodness of its own civilization. This is the very definition of demoralization. Today, there are within Europe and the U.S. so-called no-go zones where the police cannot deal effectively with Islamic populations. In the case of America, such Islamic populations do not respect the U.S., its laws, or its principles. We can tell by people like Rashida Tlaib. There's a little more to this, but I don't think it's necessary per se. But there's a warfare that's being waged against the United States. It's a warfare by immigration. And I believe that it started, in my opinion, with the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. And I get the goal, or at least in pretense, the goal was to stop discriminating. But that was the Democrat Party, the party of the KKK, the party that were anti-civil rights until it became politically inexpedient to be anti-civil rights. And then all of a sudden they lied and said there was a big switch and all this kind of nonsense. So I don't believe them. I don't believe Ted Kennedy, the liberal liar of the United States Senate who passed away quite some time ago. I definitely don't believe LBJ, who presided over the war on poverty that increased the welfare state, where more minorities went on the government dole and kicked the daddies out of the household. I don't believe them. I don't believe those were their intentions. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Also follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, True Social Getter, Facebook. Wherever I am, you can find me at The Carl Jackson Show. And until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.